Hello, and welcome to this session where we talk about effective use of storytelling in book writing. Effective use of storytelling in book writing. My name is Chinyere Izibia Deyemo, and I'll be your coach and accountability partner on this journey. So, in this session, we'll be talking about effective use of storytelling in book writing. It is important that we understand that stories are accounts of either imaginative or real people, events, and situations. So, how is it important in our book writing endeavors? It is important that we note that both adults and children love stories. They love stories because stories are interesting, they are captivating, they are intriguing, they are memorable, they evoke emotions, they connect people, they teach, they simplify concepts. So it is important that when thinking of writing a book, you take advantage of the storytelling tool in order to connect with your audience, simplify your concepts, and evoke their emotions so that you keep them interested on the subject matter in order to get that holistic solution that you are offering them. So today I'm here to show you how you can effectively use storytelling in order to captivate your audience attention so that they will stay focused on reading your book and then getting that message, getting that holistic solution that you have for them. So here are a few things you might want to keep at the back of your mind when you think of employing storytelling in order to pass across the message in your book. Number one, you have to be intentional about the story you tell. You don't just tell any story. You must be clear about the part that that story is playing in your book. Is it to help show your customers that you're an expert on the subject? Is it to help show how painful the problem is or help show how beautiful the solution is? There must be an important role that your story, that particular story that you're employing, is playing in that part of the book. So it must either show the problem that you're trying to solve or support the importance of the solution you are preferring to your audience, or even showing your expertise on the subject matter. So you have to be very intentional. Don't just tell stories for the fun of telling stories, but tell stories because of the role that your story plays in your book. Number two, you have to be very strategic with storytelling. You don't just tell stories because they are interesting, sweet, and all of that. No, you have to tell stories because of what you also gain by telling those particular stories. There are stories you tell that portray you as an expert in your niche, while there are some stories you tell that will end up showing you as an amateur in your field. So it is important that you do not tell stories that downplay on your intelligence and your brilliance. Instead, you tell stories that show your skills and that promotes you as an expert in your niche. For instance, you can tell a story like, some time ago when I had a consultation with a client on this subject matter, XYZ happened, or they said XYZ. And I believe that a lot of people are on this table or have the same challenge. And I want to use the same method I use in helping my clients to get their solution to also help you. Here is how it goes. You see that by this, you have established yourself as an authority in your field and shown your audience that you know what you're doing. You have worked with other professionals on this subject and you have what it takes to help them. So, very important. Your stories, the stories you use in your book must be such that help you achieve the kind of image that you deserve, or it helps your book achieve a pride of place, shows your book as one written by a professional on the subject. So be very strategic. When thinking of adding stories, make sure you add stories that puts you, your work, and your book in an advantageous light. Number three, you have to be skillful in telling your story. Yes, it is important. Have you listened to some people tell stories and they suck you in and you're just there gaping and opening your mouth and just listening to them tell stories? Whereas there are other people who will tell stories and you almost want to sleep off. So it is important that when thinking of using storytelling as a means of communication, then you make sure that you tell the story skillfully. You take advantage of the suspense and the climax in order to help your audience follow you through in order to get the juice that you are bringing in through your story. So practice the story you want to tell so well that it becomes seamless. Remember, You can use either imaginary stories or real life stories to buttress your point as a writer. So whichever of the stories you're using, whether real life or imaginative, make sure that you have so well mastered the story to the point you can tell it seamlessly and get your target audience attention for them to get the juice that you have to offer. So it is important to note that storytelling is very important in your work, especially when your work is a self-help book. If it's a novel already, then it's already a story you're telling. But when you're thinking of writing a self-help book, that means you basically be teaching. And because you are simply teaching, throwing information at your audience, many a times it may seem like the whole book is boring. But by the time you make use of storytelling in your work, you see that there is a fluctuation in the tempo of your work. There are some parts that are sucking your audience into the work so much that they cannot disconnect from the work. So that by the time you are bombarding them with all the information you're giving to them, there is a connection. They understand what you're saying because you are using your stories to buttress your points so that at no point do they feel lost. And it's also important that when you're thinking of using storytelling, you use it in the language that your customers understand. For instance, if you're going to be writing a religious book, then it is important that you use a lot of the religious lingua. For instance, by the grace of God, I have faith, it is well. These terminologies are such that are dominant in the Christian religious faith. So if you're thinking of writing a book and using stories, make sure that you're also using the everyday language that is used in that environment. At this juncture, I believe that I have been able to enlighten you on the importance of storytelling in your book. Don't assume that all your customer need is information to solve their problems. As much as they need information to solve their problem, they also want to enjoy the process while gathering the information. So you don't want your book to be that book that people don't read to the end and pass on to their friends. You want people to read your book and remember your solutions via the stories that you have used in conveying them. So how then do you source for stories to buttress your point? Look at all the chapters of your book or the subtitles of your book and decide which stories will be appropriate for each of the chapters. Do that before you go into the writing process so that you know what story will be useful for chapter 1, what story will be useful for chapter 2, and what story will be useful for chapter 3. It is important for you to also note that you can use storytelling according to your discretion. Depending on the length of your chapters, you can use as much as 2, 3 stories in one chapter, but make sure that it does not seem as if you're telling a lot of story and not giving your audience the expected information. So make sure that your story is not there just by itself, but supporting the information that you are putting out. So look at all your chapters, decide what stories are appropriate for which, and then practice telling them before putting them in your book. By the time you are done with this, you will see that you have a robust book that is both informative and enjoyable at the same time. So for this video, I would like to see a list of stories that you're going to use to buttress your point. You can just give me the title of your story. You can just say in chapter 1, I'm going to use my primary school story. In chapter 2, I'm going to use customer B's story. In chapter 3, I'm going to be using my church sister's story. In chapter 4, I'm going to be using my lecturer's story. So I just want to see that to make sure that you have been able to break down your chapters and decided what stories you're going to be using to buttress your point. I wish you all the best as you go on your writing endeavor. See you in the next video.